San Francisco, 1970. Chinatown, which is to say the specific arrangement of streets and memory and repetition that has learned to exist inside a city that has never fully decided what to do with it, and so has learned to do everything for itself. To wake itself and carry itself and watch itself with the specific vigilance of something that understands that being watched is not the same as being protected, and that this morning carries the specific quality of a day that has already begun, before most of the city has opened its eyes, the vendors already setting out their produce with the specific careful placement of things that must look abundant, even when abundance is not guaranteed, and the steam from the kitchens already rising into the air with the specific quiet insistence of work that began long before the sun considered arriving, and the old men already seated on their benches with the specific, still patience of people who have seen enough mornings to understand that each one will ask something of them whether they are ready or not. And Bruce Lee is already in motion, before the street has fully decided what kind of morning it is going to be, already moving through Grant Avenue with the specific economy of someone who does not separate movement from thinking, because for him, the two are the same process expressed in different parts of the body, and his jacket is dark, and his pace is unhurried, and his eyes are doing the work they always do, which is reading, which is collecting the specific information of everything around him without appearing to collect anything at all, because the specific quality of his presence is not loud, not declarative, not the kind of presence that announces itself to a street that has already learned to ignore announcements, but rather the specific quiet density of someone who is entirely there, entirely within his own body, and entirely aware of every other body moving within the same space. And the morning accepts him the way it accepts everything that does not disrupt its rhythm, which is without resistance and without acknowledgement, because Chinatown does not acknowledge what does not require acknowledgement. And across the street, two children are watching him the way children watch something they do not yet understand but feel is important, standing in the doorway of a narrow restaurant that smells of broth and oil and thyme, their hands resting against the frame with the specific unconscious stillness of observation. And they are not watching him because they know his name, because they do not, but because there is something in the specific way he moves that does not match the other movements on the street, something that suggests a different relationship to weight, to balance, to the simple act of placing one foot in front of the other. And further down the street, on a bench that has held the same body for the same hour every morning for the past 12 years, an old man sits with the specific posture of someone who has long ago stopped expecting the world to change, but has not stopped watching it anyway. His hands folded, his eyes open, carrying the specific long memory of a neighborhood that has learned to survive not by forgetting but by remembering everything, and deciding each morning what can be carried forward and what must be left behind. Bruce Lee passes both the children and the old man without looking at them directly, but with a specific awareness of their presence that does not require sight, because awareness for him is not dependent on direction, and he continues down the street as the morning continues to assemble itself around him, piece by piece, sound by sound, until the specific shape of the day begins to emerge from the accumulation of small actions. And it is at the intersection near Stockton Street that the shift begins, which is not visible at first as a shift, but as a slight tightening in the specific atmosphere of the street, the kind of tightening that occurs when a different kind of attention enters a space, attention that is not interested in participating, but in controlling, and the patrol car is already there, angled slightly into the curb with the specific casual authority of something that expects the street to adjust itself around it. Officer Daniels steps out of the car with the specific posture of someone who believes the uniform is not something he wears, but something he is, and his eyes move across the street, not to observe, but to select, to find the specific point at which his presence can be made visible, can be felt, can be imposed in the quiet, routine way that has become the structure of his mornings. And he sees Bruce Lee not as a person moving through a space, but as a disruption of the specific hierarchy he has constructed in his mind, the hierarchy that determines who belongs and who must be reminded that they do not, and the ease with which Bruce Lee walks registers not as neutrality, but as defiance. as the specific kind of unspoken defiance that does not announce itself and therefore feels more dangerous than anything that does. And Bruce Lee continues walking, unaware in the superficial sense, but fully aware in the deeper sense. The sense that registers shifts in attention the way other people register changes in temperature, and his pace does not change, because changing it would be a response, and he has not yet decided that a response is required. The children feel it before they understand it, the specific tightening of something invisible, and their bodies lean slightly forward without realizing they are doing it, drawn into the moment by the specific gravity of something about to happen, while the old man on the bench does not move at all, because he has felt this tightening before many times, and knows that movement will not change what comes next. Officer Daniels crosses the street with the specific, deliberate stride of someone who has already decided the outcome of the encounter he is about to initiate, and the distance between him and Bruce Lee closes not quickly, not dramatically, but with the slow inevitability of something that has happened many times before and expects to happen the same way again. And he reaches out, not suddenly, not violently, but with the specific casual entitlement of someone who has never had their right to reach questioned. And his hand makes contact with Bruce Lee's shoulder in the specific flat pressure of a gesture that is meant to stop, to claim, to assert. And Bruce Lee stops, not because the hand has stopped him, but because he has chosen to stop, which is a different kind of stopping entirely. The specific, controlled stillness of someone who has allowed the contact to exist without yet deciding what it means. And his body shifts almost imperceptibly, adjusting not away from the hand but around it, the way water adjusts around a stone without resisting it. And Daniels sees the stop and misreads it immediately, sees compliance where there is calculation, sees the end of motion where there is only a pause, and his grip tightens slightly, not enough to hurt, but enough to confirm to himself that the control he believes he has is real. And Bruce Lee turns his head just enough to bring Daniels into his field of vision. Not fully, not confrontationally, but with this specific minimal movement required to gather information. And his eyes meet Daniels's with the specific flat clarity of someone who is not reacting but assessing. And in that moment, nothing happens, which is what makes the moment dangerous, because the specific quality of stillness that exists between them is not empty, not passive, but full, carrying within it the accumulation of decisions not yet made. And Daniels feels it without understanding it. Feels the slight resistance not in the shoulder beneath his hand, but in the air itself, as if something has shifted just outside the range of his comprehension, and he misreads it again. He leans closer, his voice entering the space with the specific, condescending tone that has become habitual, the tone that assumes the conversation is already over before it begins. And he says something that lands between them with the weight of routine authority, expecting it to settle the moment, to complete it. But the moment does not complete, because Bruce Lee does not respond, not verbally, not immediately, and the silence that follows is not the silence Daniels expects, not the silence of submission, but the specific, deliberate silence of someone who is choosing not to speak, because speaking would reduce the situation to something smaller than it is. And Daniels's hand remains on his shoulder, and the children across the street feel something change again. A second, tightening layered on top of the first, and the old man on the bench lifts his gaze just slightly. Not surprised, not alarmed, but attentive in a way that suggests that what comes next will matter. And Daniels, who has spent years inside the specific rhythm of encounters that resolve themselves quickly and predictably, finds that this one is not resolving, not closing, not moving toward the familiar endpoint he expects. And the unfamiliarity produces a small irritation that begins in his chest and moves outward into his hand, which tightens again on Bruce Lee's shoulder with the specific insistence of someone who believes that pressure will produce clarity, and Bruce Lee allows the pressure, which is not the same as accepting it, because the specific quality of his stillness changes again, deepens, becomes something denser, something that exists not just in his muscles but in the arrangement of his entire body, the alignment of weight and balance and intention that is invisible to most people but unmistakable to anyone who has ever stood close enough to feel it. And Daniels feels it now, Not consciously, not in a way he can articulate, but as a slight disruption in the expected feedback of contact. The shoulder beneath his hand not yielding, not tensing, but existing with a kind of quiet certainty that does not match the situation he believes he is controlling. And he misreads it again. He steps around slightly, positioning himself more directly in front of Bruce Lee, bringing his face into full view, expecting eye contact to complete what the hand has begun, expecting the specific hierarchy he understands to become visible in the arrangement of their bodies. But the hierarchy does not appear, because Bruce Lee does not arrange himself within it. He stands exactly as he was, the specific, still center of a space that is beginning to reorganize itself around him, and his eyes meet Daniels's not with challenge, not with defiance, but with the specific calm attention of someone who is seeing everything and reacting to nothing. And this is where the discomfort begins to grow. Because Daniels cannot locate the expected response, cannot find the submission he is accustomed to reading in faces and bodies, cannot confirm the outcome he has already decided upon, and the absence of confirmation begins to feel like a problem that must be corrected. And so he adds another layer. His voice sharpens slightly, the specific edge of impatience entering it, and his free hand lifts, not yet striking, not yet acting, but entering the space between them with the specific preparatory motion of someone who is about to escalate, about to convert irritation into action. And the children see this. They do not understand the mechanics of what is happening, but they recognize the pattern, the specific sequence of movements that leads to something they have seen before, something that always ends the same way, and their bodies tense in anticipation of that ending. And the old man on the bench exhales slowly, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the specific measured breath of someone who has witnessed this pattern unfold too many times to count, and who knows that the outcome is rarely altered by what comes next. And Bruce Lee sees the hand, not just the hand, but the intention behind it, the trajectory it is beginning to take, the specific committed force of someone who believes that the situation requires a demonstration, a correction, a visible assertion of control. And his body responds, not with movement, not yet, but with a shift so subtle that it would be invisible to anyone not looking for it. The redistribution of weight, the slight adjustment of stance, the preparation that is not preparation for attack, but for possibility, for the full range of outcomes that exist within a fraction of a second. And Daniels's hand continues its arc. And then it stops, mid-air. Not because it has been blocked, not because it has been grabbed or redirected or interrupted in any visible way, but because something in front of it has changed. Because in the space between the hand and Bruce Lee's face, something has become unmistakably clear, something that bypasses thought and moves directly into the part of the body that recognizes danger before it can be named. And Daniels feels it with the specific immediacy of instinct, the sudden, undeniable awareness that the motion he's about to complete will not produce the outcome he expects, and his hand freezes, suspended in the air between intention and action, held there not by force but by recognition, the recognition of something in Bruce Lee's stillness that has transformed from passive to absolute, from quiet to undeniable, the specific quality of readiness that does not threaten but does not yield, and in that frozen moment, the entire street changes. The children stop breathing. The old man leans forward just slightly, and Daniel stands with his hands suspended, caught in a decision he did not know he was making, unable to move forward and unwilling to pull back, existing in the narrow space between certainty and doubt. And Bruce Lee does nothing, which is what makes the moment complete, because the specific power of the situation is not in what he does, but in what he does not do. The restraint that holds everything in place, the decision not to act when action is available, when action would be easy, when action would be justified, and that decision costs him. It is visible in the slight tightening of his jaw, in the controlled rhythm of his breathing, in the way his hands remain at his sides when they could be doing something else entirely, something that would resolve the situation in a different way, a faster way, a way that would satisfy something immediate and personal. But he does not choose that way, because the children are watching. Because the morning is larger than the moment, because the specific consequence of action would extend beyond the space between him and Daniels, would reach into the street, into the doorway, into the understanding that is forming in the faces across from him. And so he holds the stillness, and Daniels feels it, feels the cost of it without understanding its source, feels the imbalance of a situation that is no longer moving in the direction he expected, and the frozen hand begins to tremble slightly. Not visibly enough to be noticed by most, but enough to be felt by him, enough to signal that something has shifted beyond his control. And then, another presence enters. A second patrol car pulls up, not urgently, not dramatically, but with a specific routine arrival of reinforcement, and Officer Ramirez steps out with the specific alert attention of someone responding to a call that carried just enough weight to matter. And he sees the scene, sees Daniels with his hands suspended, sees Bruce Lee standing in stillness, and something in the arrangement of bodies interrupts the immediate classification of the situation, delays the automatic assumption of roles, introduces a pause into the process of understanding, and Ramirez looks more closely. His eyes move over Bruce Lee's face, his posture, the specific quality of his presence, and recognition begins not as certainty, but as familiarity. The slow assembling of a name that has been heard in a different context, in a different kind of conversation, and he steps closer, not aggressively, not authoritatively, but carefully. The specific caution of someone who senses that the situation is not what it appears to be, and he speaks quietly, his voice directed not at Bruce Lee but at Daniels, carrying the specific weight of a question that is already beginning to answer itself. Do you know who this is? And the question lands, not loudly, but heavily. And Daniels, whose hand is still suspended, whose certainty has already begun to fracture, turns his head slightly, his eyes searching Ramirez's face for the confirmation he suddenly realizes he does not have. And Ramirez says the name, softly, but clearly enough. And the name changes everything. Not the street, not the morning, not the children or the old man or the vendors arranging their produce, but the internal structure of Daniels's understanding, the specific framework through which he has been interpreting the situation, and that framework collapses in an instant, replaced by something else, something less certain, something that requires reevaluation, and his hand drops, slowly, deliberately, as if lowering it too quickly would draw attention to the fact that it had been frozen at all. And he steps back. Just slightly. But enough to create space where there had been none, and Bruce Lee remains still for a moment longer, allowing the space to exist, allowing the situation to settle into its new configuration, and then he exhales, a quiet, controlled release that marks the end of something that never fully began. And he turns, not abruptly, not triumphantly, but with the same specific economy with which he has moved all morning. And he steps away from the intersection, away from Daniels, away from the suspended moment that has now resolved into something quieter, something less visible but no less real. And as he walks, he passes the children again. And this time, one of them meets his eyes, just for a second. And in that second, something is transferred. Not a lesson, not an explanation, but a recognition. The specific recognition of what it looks like when someone chooses not to do what they are capable of doing, when someone carries something heavier than the moment requires and continues walking anyway. And the old man on the bench watches him pass, his gaze steady, his expression unchanged, but his eyes following Bruce Lee with the specific attention of someone who has just seen something rare, something that will not be spoken about but will not be forgotten. And behind him, Daniels stands in the space that has been left behind, his posture altered, his understanding unsettled, the specific weight of what has happened settling into him in a way that will not leave quickly, if it leaves at all, and the street resumes. The vendors return to their arrangements. The doors open and close. The morning continues its forward motion with the specific indifference of time, which does not pause for moments like this, which carries them forward without acknowledgement. And Bruce Lee walks. down Grant Avenue, into the light that has fully arrived now. The specific brightness of late morning illuminating everything equally, the buildings, the faces, the spaces between them, and the two children remain in the doorway, watching him go with the specific stillness of understanding that has not yet found its language. And the old man remains on the bench, carrying the moment the way he carries all moments, quietly, completely, without expectation of resolution. And the city continues around them, above them, beyond them, unaware of what has occurred in this small section of one street on one morning. And the light continues to fall the way it always falls, without preference, without judgment, illuminating everything and explaining nothing, leaving the work of meaning where it has always been, in the bodies that were present, in the eyes that saw, in the silence that follows. And Bruce Lee becomes smaller as he moves away, his figure dissolving into the movement of the street, until he is no longer distinct, no longer separate, just another part of the specific flow of a neighborhood that continues to carry itself forward, carrying what it has seen, what it has endured, what it has chosen not to become. And the children will remember. Not the details, not the words, but the stillness. The specific stillness of a hand that did not move, and a man who did not need to, watching a figure in a dark jacket disappear into the morning and not look back.